from my perspective, we've got this incredible panel of people. We've got representing sort of all these phases of fundraising, from Deirdre, the entrepreneur, to Mary, the angel investor, Drew, the startup preparation, investor readiness guru, and Donnchadh over at the EntertradeIreland's HPSU program. So we've got a really rounded perspective on startups and fundraising. So I just throw out the real question right now, which is, how does a startup best position themselves for getting investment at these different phases? And I'll probably start with Drew. You're the investor readiness, just to sort of throw it at you there. What would you say to that?
What do you mean at different phases?
Well, the different stages of that fundraising journey, right? So, you know, you're very, very early stage, you haven't raised any money, then you're going into different phases, different types of investors, different types of investment.
So, the investor landscape out there is very, that would have an expectation, a relatively high bar of how well informed startups are if they're going to ask you for money, well informed about what the journey might look like, simply because there's lots of people like me out there now in accelerators, there's lots of resources for sit down and talk to people and educate them. There's also a lot of material online that if you meet an investor, they kind of go, you do know what I mean when I talk about seed and Series A. You do know what I mean when I'm saying it's a safe go for a purple loan number. You do know what I mean when I say runway. You do know what I mean when I say, will this, last you 12 months or 18 months? So the first thing is educate yourself. There's a lot of material out there, and there's a lot of resources, agencies, whether it's accelerators or the incubators like the institutes of technology that would help on that.
Okay.
What you need to, so you do your education before you go out and do so. Fundamentally understand this about private investors. So by private investors particularly mean later stage funds, which might be Series A or later. Almost all their money is private. And so these are guys who will put 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 million into a company. And the expectation of angel investors, weirdly they have very similar expectations. They need to make 10 to 20 times the money. So if I invest 1 million in your company and I say 20% of your company, that values your company at 5 million. Very quick maths. Everyone get that? Just 1 million, I take 20% and post on these 5 million valuation. Right, Donnchadh. The pre-post. So I own 20% of your company. I need to believe it could be worth 100 days a few years' time. 5, 6, 7 years' time. Otherwise, I shouldn't write the check. Doesn't mean you don't operate in business. It means the risk profile, the reward profile of these investors, they need really high returns. I have met companies who've already raised $500,000 or $1 million. They don't even appreciate that the next time they go out, they're looking for 1 to 5 million. That's the expectation of the investors. But you can educate yourself from that. So it's understanding the return profile of a private capital. And angel investors need a really high return as well. Because they're not just managing other people's money. So venture capitalists manage other people's money. Angels, it's their own money. And the reason they need all these high profile, at that high level returns, that's something like 70 to 80% of the money that they put out there, they'll make losses or they'll break even off. So they need a couple that's really, really high. But I didn't want to make a downer on it, but it's an awful lot of companies will not be able to imagine that they could be worth 100 million, or 50 million, or 200 million in a few years' time. If you can't imagine that or present the cases to why that might happen, actually, there's an awful lot of the investment landscape outside of very early stage public money won't really be a fit. That's actually something people don't understand well enough. And it should need to be able to talk through a story as to why this company might be worth a lot of money a few times.
Thanks for that. And Mary, from an angel investor's perspective yourself, obviously, Drew points out that profile. How do companies need to position themselves to talk to angels? Is it just about the education? What's the positioning there?
So I want to ask a question first. Who in the room is a startup founder or part of a startup organisation? And who's raised money?
Yeah.
That's a much smaller number. Okay. So angel investors, so I guess fall into two camps. Tom, really, they're the ones that everybody knows that are well known and advertise themselves. and then there are the ones that fly a bit more under the radar and are more difficult to find. But pretty much all of them will make a public statement of some sort about what their investment thesis is, and what I mean by that is what sorts of companies, what types of sectors they invest in. And I guess the advice that I would give is kind of similar to what Drew was saying. Really do your homework on who's investing, what sort of investments they're making, how much they invest, and do all of that, because and for me, I get about maybe 30 inbound emails via LinkedIn every day, and usually 30 of them are from companies that are not part of my investing thesis. You know, I'm really clear about what I invest in. I invest in women founders or founding teams who are working on a tech for good project, something that's going to make the world a better place, and where I, through my network or my connections, or through my own experience, can add significant value to that company early stage. But nearly all of the inbound interest I get starts from founding men who have different sorts of companies that I'm not interested in. So, sometimes I go back to them and I say, this isn't really the right way to find an angel. I probably only really respond to inbound interest that comes to me via somebody else. So, it's called a warm introduction. So, I mean, when you've identified who your listed target angels are, the next thing we should do is try and find somebody that you know in your network who knows them, that can make an introduction for you, because you'll have more success that way.
Bring down. That's great advice.
That applies to venture investors as well.
Yeah.
They tend to go with the warm introductions more than the cold.
Got it. And Donnchadh, from an Enterprise Ireland's point of view, how do you respond to that? Is it a warm introduction, or how do you
Take them off.
Yeah.
But we get to talk to everyone. And we sure, and like you said, because we're at the stage, so we're not discerning as to who gets the introduction. But similarly, we have minimum bars in terms of what we're expecting. So ultimately, our clients have to be exporting, they have to have more than 10 people, and they have to be able to get to 1 million in sales, which arguably from an investor, from a VC perspective, really isn't in the ballpark at all. But what we're trying to do is that we don't want to necessarily focus stuff, but most of the companies that want to go and start a company, especially in EdTech, will be looking beyond the island of Ireland. So I'm assuming that that's a class killer. But really, our job is to have the initial conversations, and if it's not right for us, so we have. So my team has 450 companies in its portfolio. That's quite a lot. So we just keep taking everything in that turns up at the front door. We would do nothing with anyone. So we have to kind of put a bar over them and say, do we think that this has the wherewithal? Actually, not to get to 100x return or 10x return, to the next stage. If they can get it to the next stage, do they have the people? Do they have an idea? The tech is probably not developed fully yet. But do they have whatever it takes to get just to the next step? That's the bar that we're looking to do, and we've a couple of tools that we can use in terms of feasibility or PSSF. We're working with different angel groups across the country. But we're really trying to say, can we get them to the next step? Because at that point, there's another set of investors. There's no point in going and talking to a Series A investor where you don't even have an entity. It just doesn't work. It's not the days of being able to get a whatever 2 or 3 million investment on a deck and say something like they're well gone. People, the world has changed. The boot is on the other foot in that investors. I think the power has slipped back towards investors. We're back in 2020 for 21 and 22. There was kind of irrational exuberance where everyone was raising money just as good. Everyone began to panic and began firing money into stuff. I think you'll find definitely now that the boot is on the other foot. So you need to be careful with those conversations. Like I think I always want to say to people, there's no problem having a conversation with an investor if you're not asking them for money, but you need to be careful that if you mean a free conversation is a good thing, but actually if you're going to ask them for money in a while, they really are assessing you all the time. Even angels, like you mean at events like this, you can have a free, easy conversation, but you need to be laying a couple of markers down to say if you have a team, you have a good idea space, and that you have maybe technology. And EdTech is a weird one as well, because a lot of EdTech we see is not technology based, it's content based and methodology based. And from there's a reason there are not that many professional ed tech investors, because it's a difficult one to scale and to drive those levels of return, like Mary's done with some of her companies in the past. But they're kind of not, they're not huge numbers of them, and I think you need to keep positioning and understanding. So Whereas Ireland would always ask the question, because we know angel investors, we know VCs are going to ask you these questions as you come down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the boot on the other foot, you've been wearing that hood for a while. Deirdre, you've gone through the process. Can you respond a little bit to the positioning statements and the education from the entrepreneur's perspective at the start and through it?
Yeah, so tiny bit of background. We've raised in total about 2.1 million. We're building a next generation technology platform for professional services. So verticals like accounting, tax, our customers are the firms like PwC, Deloitte, EY, and our users are their trainees. So from the founder perspective, I've gone through 2 investment rounds and benefited from the advice of the likes of Drew Berry and the money of IntertradeIreland and support as well. I'd say a couple of things. Yes, EdTech can be difficult because traditionally it was a content game, it was the first wave of online learning was probably more around taking an existing model and putting it online, rather than doing maybe anything too transformational on the tech side. I think that's changing now with Gen AI, where the line between content and delivery is becoming more blurred. But when you're raising investment, I think there's 2 things that, in my experience, investors want to see. One is a compelling vision. So in a startup, by definition, you're trying to apply an existing solution to a new market, or a new solution into an existing market. So you're starting out with a set of assumptions about what you're trying to do. In our case, our assumptions were around that wave of online learning, that you could do more with technology, around what the internet has done to all our attention spans and why it matters in the domains that we chose, and how you can embed learning theory into a tech-based platform. So I found that if you were clear on your assumptions at different stages of the process, you're kind of showing investors that you're approaching it from a logical and scientific perspective. You're going to try and prove or have your assumptions disproven by contact with reality, being your users and being the market. So will like using it? Will people buy it? And then the second thing is traction appropriate to the stage that you're raising at. So when we were raising at pre-seed level, we had 1 customer, we had around 25 users, we had 1 small bit of a product, we had about 3 grand in revenue. It sounds tiny, but we raised 600 grand pre-seed round off the back of that. I think why the vision was strong, the assumptions were strong, they could see how that would scale up. The reason that traction is very important is we might start off with the assumption that we create a product and then people beat a path to the door to buy it and use it. That's really not the case. Paul Graham has a famous essay, "Do Things That Don't Scale." Everything that happens in the early stages, the founding team have to really just hustle to make it take off, to make it work. You have to see a lot of things that don't scale, and I think investors want to see evidence that you have that determination, the drive, the smarts, the hustle to actually get this off the ground. And money isn't always the limiting factor. Money is one of many resources that you're missing compared to your competitors, so that they just want to see that you can make really good progress. So I think in our case, when we went to raise the second round, we had grown from that 1 customer to around 8, but some of them were some of the largest accounting firms in the world. They're Irish or UK branches. We had grown from 1 product to maybe 9 or 10 things that we could sell people, and the vision had evolved as well. So I would say vision plus traction appropriate to stage is the kind of key things that people will be looking for.
Okay, brilliant. And you talked a little bit about the team and the communication between the startup founders and the team and the investors. It's not always growth and sunshine, right? So how do you manage the ups and downs and the difficult conversations with your investors when things aren't necessarily going the way you expected them to? Have you experienced that? I mean, I can imagine every entrepreneur does.
Yeah, for sure. I think the initial communication is key. Like, you're not saying that this has 100% shot of like working, you're saying these are the assumptions that we're setting out to prove, here's what we're going to do. Not all assumptions will be proven. You'll have some disappointments, customer churn, all that. I found with the investors, it just upfront and honest communication. You can be disappointed about things that have gone wrong, lick your wounds in private, take your time to get over it, but then come back with solid actions around things that aren't working and how you're going to overcome them. Because any experienced investor will expect that it's not going to be just this unproblematic straight line hockey stick growth. You know, every startup that's kind of has faced many existential moments. So yeah, I think proactive communication. So we would send quarterly updates to our investors with detailed information of progress, challenges we're having, financials, all that kind of thing. I think that gives them comfort that we're taking seriously the management of their money, trying our best to get a return for them. But yeah, not just painting the most rosy path.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. And Mary, you would have seen this from the other side. You'd have a number of insights.
So, I mean, as Dee says, that experienced investors, particularly those that are former founders themselves, will know how difficult it is to execute against your plan in a perfect textbook world. No, they just will. And I guess, you know, the other thing is the investors never want to have any nasty surprises. It's far better that you are honest about, and you know, they're not there to mark your homework.
Wow.
Your investors own part of your business and they want you to be successful. And so if you've got a problem or if there's a challenge that you're facing, it's likely that maybe they have something in their kit bag that can help you in terms of either connections or customers or people or where to go get some more money from or whatever it is. The likelihood is that they will be able to help. So you should always just be honest and transparent in your dealings with your investors.
No, and that's really important point, that activity, that active support that the investors bring to the startups. And, you know, John, from your perspective at Enterprise Ireland, you would be very active in terms of engaging with the what did you say, 50 companies in your portfolio?
450. Yes. 450 and half of those are post our first investment and half are pre. So we do two different bodies of work with each of those. But the ones afterwards, again, that's to try and say, like, you're probably at your most dangerous when you create that first pre-seed round, because you think I have money and now I can do it's all great. Well, actually, you're at your most vulnerable because you genuinely only get one shot at that first that somebody's willing to take. You know what? There, as Dee said, there are a set of assumptions. That's a plan. I know it's not going to end up like that, but that has a fighting chance of getting to there. So you really do need to execute on it. And while you mightn't get to where you said you'd get to, you need to demonstrate that you made progress. So it's the focus that we have with companies and when we deal with them, because we know, again, investors are going to ask these questions: is what are the demonstrable pieces of traction that you continue to make? Is it that Dee said you had the first customer that was a small enough product, and they developed more products that they sold that? It's traction, and communicate that all the way through. When you get to that next level, that next investment, people are going to ask, well, how have you done with the last one? And future performance does dictate future many. I'm not saying that's clear, but when we go to our investment committee for what we call follow-on or second round investment, I can count on, I finally counted one hand at a time we've actually hit the target that was set out. Yeah. But we will still go and ask for more if we can demonstrate, no, they've made commercial progress, they've made technical progress, and that they're continuing to march in the right direction. Sorry, just one thing that occurred to me. I've seen entrepreneurs, and I think it's not wanting to be slammed, but we're seeing people just provide a short snippet email update to all investors or relevant people, and they're respectful when they ask, can I send you this? So I get kind of easy updates from a bunch of companies in a really short snippet format that they kind of, I know where that's going, so that the next time it's not a huge brain dump going to go, really doing this, and this. they're just in my ether and they're in my consciousness as they're coming through. So the next time I meet them, I kind of know a bit about where they're heading. So, but it's really short, and I just think it could be a powerful way of doing it. Good and bad.
Yeah, so it's a lot about that relationship between the team and the investors, and that's why I kind of rewind it a little bit back towards that team structure, right? So early pre-money companies are putting their teams together, and so I turned to Drew as, you know, from your perspective, what are the characteristics you want to see in a good startup team, you know, that are coming out?
So solo founders, will be examples of solo founders who've done it really well. But the bulk of time, and we've got a lot of investors and their scars up in the solo file was that, oh, this would be an exception. One of those exceptions. Most of the time, investors like to see at least 2 founders. The research says between 2 to 3 founders, like best at founding kind of pool to start with. They want to see diverse skill sets. Gender diversity is really helpful, and there's statistics to show diverse skill sets and gender diversity, you get better outputs in terms of more successful scaling revenue business and more, and even success in raising capital as well. But so you're looking for also if they work together. There's an indicator as well that founders that aren't just buddies but actually did some work together are more likely to be able to progress that. We would also talk to them about founders agreements or founder shareholders agreements. So this thing called reverse vesting is basically a promise and commitment between you and your co-founders. That normally comes into play when an investor turns up in Ireland. More and more people are beginning to early or get a formal structure in that from member arrangement, because possibly one of the biggest risks for shareholders, this market may or may not be there, the product may not be good, but there's a lot of scars for investors, entrepreneurs, because the reason the startup fell apart, founders fell apart, and that's a huge thing. So at the early stage for the investors, they kind of go, market's there, the product seems great, customer love it, so all of this good indications. Are these 2 or 3 people going to go the course? Will they be able to work together? You know, so early on people are going, tell us about force great hack, and we're being exhausted. Well, I'm actually out of that. Figure out it's beautiful and not quite that good. But they're really concerned that is a really functional, diverse skill set, and there's really good. That it's going to stick together. They're going to persevere together for the next couple of years. Because if they don't, it's a write-off. There are times they're going to be fixed, but the early years, if that doesn't work, there's nothing to rescue.
And where would a founder get templates or guidance on putting together those kind of founder agreements you're talking about?
There's a bunch of stuff online. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff online, and then we'll have a Sultan Summit, Legal Summit. There's a few different languages you can go online. A few of the law firms will show you templates as well. There's a Founder's Dilemma, it's a great book. It's an older book, 10 plus years old. So just something.
Oh, great, thanks. So we touched on some of the tractions, we touched on some of the team stuff. And Donnchadh, you mentioned earlier a little bit about the technology, especially in EdTech, we're not creating genetic codes and we're not creating medical devices in the EdTech world. This is the ICT space. Can you talk about what kinds of technology are important for these kind of companies as they're getting invested in?
I think they need to have EdTech is still about content and process mainly, but I think it needs to be a robust. Too often we've seen, particularly in EdTech, some say HR talent tech, where it's effectively as Dee did like earlier, it's the automation of an existing process. But I think that to have a sufficiently good tech stack doesn't have to be amazing, because actually you shouldn't be spending coding on stuff that isn't going to add value. I think just park AI for a side interest. I don't think anyone has figured out what the impact that's going to be in EdTech per stage. But it actually comes back down to the family team discussion. A lot of times we see EdTech, the HR talent tech teams coming on with great domain expertise, but actually not solving for that tech piece at the start, simply outsourcing tech to wherever. And then finding if it's grant for MVP, maybe grant for first customer, when you try and start pushing volume through it, then it keels over. We've too many examples where that first check with the incumbent was supposed to help grow the team and supposed to help take over the next couple of customers that make that traction. Actually, that we played back into product to getting it scalable so they could begin to withstand the volumes going through it or the kind of the enterprise grade stuff. So it is a balance. So I think I'm just going to say tech needs to be good enough.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it needs to be unless you're going to differentiate on that.
Yeah.
And allow you to do something else. But I think a tech stack that stands up on all of the major pillars will be good enough. But be careful what you do with those initial decisions. We understand entirely why people outsource because it's the only way to get stuff done, and you have to get an MVP somehow. But just be really careful. So there's a reason, and just back to Teresa's point about founding teams. Ideally, our founding team is a diverse founding team, both in terms of a commercial, like if it's two, it's a commercial and tech. Yeah. And sorry, we have that, and if they have that and they've done it before, and they're from education, we know we're onto a winner from a medtech startup. You mean so? But that tech piece, I think, is super important in ways. But it can't be too tech because they don't sell and it pushes the balance. There's the NURC founders world now. There's a reason they put 50% of them into the room as techies and 50% of them as commercial and wanting it was a crossword device that way.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Deirdre, did you have any perspective on the tech versus team balance and battle?
So Ireland, we were very, very reluctant to invest in a company that has outsourced tech. We've done it clients, maybe because that's it. So for me to be interested, they will have had to figure out how they can bring their tech in-house. Like a business that comes just said, it's not that. It's a big challenge.
Yeah.
And so I in a previous life had an online learning business and a co-founder. I had a technical co-founder and I was commercial. So it is the dual combination. And so if you're a solo founder and you don't have that, you need to go and look for somebody who's got the other skills.
Yeah. And Deirdre, how did you manage that whole section? Were you a techie to start with, or how did you?
Yeah, so totally take the points of the panelists, but I guess there are exceptions because I was a solo founder, like still am, and the first version of our product was kind of stitched together on WordPress with some custom code, which was outsourced. So to get to that place where we were able to raise 600,000, it was just me. I'm used to kind of saying we, but it was the royal we. It was really just me at the time, plus that product that was stitched together with WordPress. I would say that what we delivered through the WordPress framework or LMS, there was enough kind of originality and stuff in it to get positive first reviews from our users. Once we raised that seed round, used that to then bring the tech in-house and totally take the points about how important it is, because I've done both the outsourced thing where you work with agencies and they've been really good. Agencies are good people, and having really good developers in-house. And there's very no comparison between the former and the latter in terms of what you can do and how you can educate yourself as a non-technical founder about the possibilities of the technology. So once we did our first raise, we built our own learning management system and platform. So we got Jamie on board, who's ex-Hostel World and Paddy Power, so used to building infrastructure at scale. And then after our last round, we got Oisin on board, who's computer science and linguistics. So he's our Gen AI or large language model ranker. So that combination, we're finding really good to bring the advances in the large language models into the technology in a workable way. But as I said, it didn't start like that. So it started, I think, again, that's part of the determination that you'll want to demonstrate to investors that you can still get something built and into the hands of users, better yet into the hands of customers who will pay you even something small from it, and then use what resources you can gather on the back of that to bring it in-house and to advance the product. So it's increased by iteration, but that's our path.
Okay. Oh, and you seem to be doing pretty well with that strategy. Look, I'm going to take it and turn it over and open up to the floor to some questions. I'm sure we have. I did put up that poll earlier, and it seems the poll was how many Which group do you identify with? Most of them are just slightly more SMEs than startups, so we're looking at early stage folks and some scaling up stage folks. So maybe, are there any questions in the room for any of the panelists or all of the panelists? I see there's one there.
Yeah, so I have a question for Donnchadh. Just in terms of from an enterprise audit perspective as well, to aside from the revenue, it's obviously crucial. What are some of the other important metrics that determine the success of your investments on working on?
That's a long, fair question. No, because it just depends so much.
Yeah.
Like, I think you just can't see past team most of the time, because all of the other stuff and all of the other
That's the time.
carnage that's going to go on early doors, if the team, all of the rest of it is replaceable, but if the team can't function together, and again, there's nothing against first-time vendors, but if we just see that as a needs point, and then traction, as Dee said earlier, just get something to show someone that someone is interested in this, and then maybe it's free. Because like it takes, like if somebody asked me to use a piece of software to prove something legal for free, I have a day job. You know what I mean? It's difficult. Whereas if somebody's willing to give you their time to install it and give you feedback, that's brilliant. If they're willing to give you a few quid for the cost or whatever, that's better. If they're willing, you know what I mean? So it's traction. So I think team and traction, if you can demonstrate those, I think and self-awareness. Like, entrepreneurs are brilliant, but sometimes they come in and they know everything. They're kind of go, this is not going to work out the way that you think it is. And for people to be aware, and I think Dee put it brilliantly and say, you're just going forward with a set of assumptions. You don't know what the future is. But you're going to say, this is the experiment they're going to conduct next, and these are the assumptions they're going to make. And you know what, some of them are going to be wrong, but I'm going to be able to A, spot it, and B, be able to pivot into it. So I think, and this is great, like, I think that's a good question for everyone, because there's great experience of what are the things that we look for.
Yeah, Drew, you look like
So,
that's probably how I should have answered the first question. The question if you don't look there, right? So there is a few stages, and some of this I'm using international language, not just Irish. So there's a pre-seed stage, a seed stage, and a Series A. Pre-seed is internationally up to 600k of a million at raise. One way of looking at it, whereas when you're trying to get a thing called product market fit. There's all kinds of definitions of product market fit. The first place it's talked about is the wrong place to go, which just says it's viral with it out of ads. Not particularly helpful. An article by Marketplace. But product market fit for most early stage companies is case studies where the value that you thought the customer would get, with case studies showing the customer getting that value. They may not have paid for it, but produce case studies that they're getting value. And some investors are happy to fund that. The tension sometimes with very early stage investors, like those 100k or $500 million rounds, is they want you to give them a scale growth story for revenue. And you're going to look for building a really large business over 5 to 10 years. Today is not where I'm trying to scale. Today I'm going to make sure that's something unique and reach value. And I have an understanding. So call that all that product market fit. You get to that stage, then if you have a good case studies and customers, you then want to go and raise a seed round that says, if you give me money, I believe there's enough customers out there in my pipeline the next year and a half, I will make 1 to 1.5 million in turnover. And you convince the seed investors. We have a bunch of seed funders, seed funds operating in Ireland who will listen to that story. If they believe that giving $1 million, $2 million, $3 million allows you to get 2 million, 2 million half turnover. Then you can go and look for Series A money, which is basically where you're saying, I believe there's a gigantic market, and with the next round I'll go from having 1.5 million to turnover to maybe 3 to 5 million. Yeah. And that's what you're asking for. Sorry.
Yeah, Gary, you were going to say something to that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about team for me. I'm not even having a conversation with you unless I've already looked at the product and like it. I've looked at how scalable I think it is, and I'm happy. You know, I'm not going to have a conversation if any of those things don't work. But when I get to the point of talking to somebody, it's all about the team, and I want to pick on something that either Drew or Donnchadh said earlier. People will watch you, so if you're engaging early doors with VCs before you're ready and you're giving them information about your business plan, they're going to refer back to that when you go back to them in a year's time, and they're going to ask you whether or not you hit those targets. So be very careful on how you share, particularly information with people when you're very early doors, because you will be measured against it later. And I guess timescales as well. I'm probably, if I meet you today and we have a chat and I like your business, I'm probably not going to write a check for 6 or 9 months. Because I'm going to wait and watch you. I'm going to watch how you get on when things are not going so well. I'm going to see how you perform when a competitor comes out of what you do. All of those things, I'm going to just sit back and watch,
The irony is at the really early stage, the investor relationship takes longer to cultivate to get the money than the later stage. Because the later stage you walk in with veterans and you find an internal ground study can make a decision in a week.
Yeah.
To kind of go, I look to the financial, I look at that, we can put 10 million in. But to get the 100k or the 500k or the million, it might be, we have cultivated this pool of perpetual investors for a year and a half. And they've seen what I've done with nothing. They've seen what I've done with PSSF for very little. And I've seen, PSSF not very little, but they've seen what I've done with limited resources. So now, yeah, it's great. You prove there's market, you prove some product market fit, not the whole thing. But that relationship building and the confidence building, there's kind of no shortcut to it. There isn't like, I was at a great demo day and they were all throwing money on the stage. It is relationship building and proving to delivering along the way.
Can I ask a question actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
Something that always comes up with early stage startups that work with us and the challenge around where they have a really good, an MVP working prototype that they can go in and test at large organisations. And Dean, you've done this, you've gone into those large corporate companies, but a lot of the barriers that they're seeing is trying to get through that technical infrastructure and buy-in that they can bring in this tech to test, even though it's at early stage development. And a lot of those bigger organizations are like, whoa, we're not bringing that in. How like an experience from the panel, like how do you see, how do companies get around that?
Just one route is you don't go for the big organisation first. You go for a smaller organisation, look at the SME route, but that transition, again, you need to be conscious in that transition that you will, or you go consumer. So a lot of we've seen some stuff that we've done under PSSF, which is it's stuff to protect kids online, stuff that ultimately it's a difficult play to go B2C all the way because it just comes like loads of money. But if you do B2C originally, it proves that people will get it and then maybe get early SME and they can start going that way. So that's taking a different route of going in. Some of the stuff, and that's one of the things where IntertradeIreland comes in. So they've done some brilliant work with the central bank. So again, we recognise people trying to do financial software. No bank is going to let you in to play their system. So we spun up a thing, a sandbox with the Central Bank of Ireland to allow companies to play. Because the big companies want the innovation. They're just scared to let these people get running around this. And again, so I will do a lot of that sort of talk to your TA around how can we do that. And then perversely, the other one we see is actually the US is much more accepting of. So line management in the US probably could bring stuff in, probably has a reasonable budget that they can write off on a credit card for 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. And we see a lot of companies getting their initial success over there.
Yeah, but you were
Sorry, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, a bit to that. So there's an idea of B2C to B. I'm going to use not my example, but I'm going to rip off the examples from teamwork and core. At some stage, they got a phone call, I think from DC, saying we have 50 of our people or some number like that using your software. We think it's great. We didn't know they bought it. And we know like a kind of an enterprise version, so we can manage this, and we might have another few other people who might want to use it. And they went to individual users to use it, saying if we go in and talk to the CTO, CIO, you get full approvals going on top down. It's just like, look, so people, if you can find users in an organization, maybe you get the users paid for it, use it on a freemium basis, and they get covered in that way.
Let's go.
And just you responding to the same question, you said your early customers were to big four accounting. These are not small companies and not easy to pull down. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think one of the learnings was it's actually kind of a bigger risk in some ways for a big company to do business with a startup than the other way around. Although there is a risk for the startup in that they tie you up in paperwork and kind of paralyzes you for a while. So assuming that they want to buy from you or trial is something, from a legal and contractual point of view, the things in our case they seem to care about were information security and data protection. Information security, we didn't have ISO accreditation at the time, but our platform is accessed by a browser, so it didn't require any downloads onto their system. So I think that helped them put us in a lesser risk categories. So, and to the contractual agreement, from a data perspective, the one thing they shared about that was that we weren't going to do anything nefarious with their employees' data. So we were just taking business card data, so names and email addresses. So it's not sensitive client information or company information. So those two things put us in a lower risk category to begin with. They still attached on multi-page schedules with all these clauses on information security and data protection. And at the start, I used to go through them line by line, think of the worst case scenario. Like, okay, can we accept this? By the end, it was just kind of like, okay, they're not, it's reputationally, they're not going to sue us start. So I'll just sign this and hope for the best. I'm being a bit cautious. We did get legal advice and it was all checked over, but I definitely kind of think, in practical terms, the risk manager in the firm just wants to know that the startup has signed it and that the main things are met. So once we're ticking the boxes, there's no point trying to negotiate the clauses. You either take or leave their InfoSec and data protection clauses. So that's just kind of the way it works. And sometimes we have to spend a bit of money on advice to be like, okay, are we in line with this? But spending money on the advice got us the logos of the big four on our deck, which got us more investments, which got us more firms. So you kind of have to think of the bigger picture and then just expect that they will have their processes and stuff. If you can persevere, then contracts are just put in the drawer and forgotten about, and it's all about how you deliver then with the implementation of the problems.
Well, I am going to have to wrap you.
Yeah, I was going to say on that note, we're going to call it.
I would love to keep the conversation going on Curves because I'd be absolutely burned.
But hopefully you guys will stick around a little bit on the coffee.
Have a chat during chat stage. Thank you.
Thank you.